I never imagined that one ordinary afternoon would change the way I looked at my family forever. My name is Rachel Turner, and I grew up in a small town in Ohio where family ties meant everything. We lived close to each other, often gathering for Sunday dinners, birthdays, and the occasional barbecue in my grandmother's backyard. Among all my relatives, my Uncle David was the one I admired the most. He was charming, funny, and always had a way of making everyone feel comfortable. To me, he was a role model, until the day I walked into his room without knocking. I was only 22 at the time, still in college, and staying at my grandmother's house for the summer. Uncle David had recently moved back in temporarily after separating from his wife, Linda. Everyone thought it was just a break, a period for them to sort things out. Linda, who had been married to him for nearly 15 years, stayed in her own apartment a few blocks away, and people assumed they'd eventually reconcile. No one questioned much because Uncle David kept smiling, joking, and living as if nothing was wrong. That summer, my grandmother's house was lively as always. Cousins came and went, friends dropped by, and I spent my mornings helping Grandma in the kitchen. One day, I had been asked to bring fresh sheets to the guest room, which was right across from Uncle David's bedroom. His door was half closed, and I figured he might be out. I didn't think much of it when I pushed it open, carrying the folded sheets in my hands. What I saw stopped me cold. Uncle David was lying on his bed, uncovered, and though he scrambled quickly to pull the blanket over himself, the damage was already done. My heart dropped, not just because I saw him vulnerable like that, but because he wasn't alone. A woman, clearly not his wife, was sitting at the edge of the bed, nervously gathering her clothes. She was younger, maybe in her late 20s, and looked like she wanted to disappear. For a moment, the three of us froze. The silence was heavy, suffocating. My uncle's face went pale, his eyes wide with both shame and anger, as if my presence there was the real violation. The woman avoided eye contact, clutching her things, and within seconds she hurried past me out the door. I was left standing there, my uncle glaring at me, the truth hanging in the air like a dark cloud. "Rachel, you shouldn't have just walked in," he muttered, his voice sharp. I swallowed hard, trying to process what I had just witnessed. That wasn't Aunt Linda," I stammered, my voice trembling. He ran his hand through his hair, avoiding my eyes. "It's complicated. You don't understand." But I did understand. As much as I didn't want to, I knew exactly what I had walked in on. My uncle, my role model, the man I had admired for years, was cheating on his wife. And now I was the one carrying the weight of his secret. The rest of that day, I avoided him. My mind kept replaying the scene, and my stomach turned every time. I felt betrayed, even though it wasn't me he had cheated on. It was Aunt Linda, the woman who had loved him, supported him, and treated our family with kindness. She had welcomed me into her home countless times, cooked meals for me, and given me advice about school. To think of her being hurt like this made my chest ache. That night, Uncle David knocked on my door. I didn't answer at first, but he came in anyway. He sat down on the chair by the window and sighed deeply. "Rachel, listen," he began softly, his tone different now. "I know what you saw today was not right, but you have to promise me you won't say anything to anyone. Especially not your grandmother. She wouldn't be able to handle it." I looked at him, my eyes filling with tears. "Why, Uncle David? Why are you doing this to Aunt Linda?" He leaned back, staring at the ceiling. "Things between us haven't been good for a long time. We fight all the time. She doesn't understand me anymore. This is just me trying to feel alive again." His words cut me deeply. Trying to feel alive? By breaking someone else's heart? I wanted to scream at him, but all I could manage was a shaky whisper. "That doesn't make it okay." Over the next few weeks, I carried the unbearable burden of his secret. Every family gathering, every Sunday dinner, I sat across from Aunt Linda, who occasionally dropped by, smiling and chatting like nothing was wrong. I wanted to tell her, to free myself from the guilt, but Uncle David's pleading eyes haunted me. He acted like nothing had happened, cracking jokes, grilling burgers, and laughing with cousins. But the weight didn't go away. If anything, it grew heavier each day. I started resenting him for putting me in that position. One afternoon, I overheard Aunt Linda on the phone with my grandmother. Her voice was shaky, and she said something about having a feeling that David wasn't being faithful. Grandma reassured her, insisting that David was just stressed and would come around. I felt sick to my stomach. Aunt Linda knew something was wrong, and I was the one holding the missing piece. The breaking point came a month later. I was at the grocery store when I saw Uncle David again, this time with the same woman. They were in the wine aisle, laughing, their hands brushing as if they were a couple. My heart pounded, and I quickly ducked behind a shelf, watching them from a distance. It was no accident, no one-time mistake. This was an ongoing affair. That night, I couldn't sleep. The guilt consumed me, and I realized that staying silent meant becoming complicit in his betrayal. I loved my family, but I couldn't keep watching Aunt Linda suffer in ignorance. So I made a decision. The next day, I called Aunt Linda and asked if I could visit her. She welcomed me warmly, as always, offering me iced tea and asking about my classes. My throat tightened as I looked into her kind eyes. Finally, I set down the glass and whispered, "Aunt Linda, there's something I need to tell you. It's about Uncle David." Her face grew serious, and she leaned closer. "What is it, Rachel?" Tears welled in my eyes as I told her everything, from the moment I walked in on him to seeing him at the store. She sat quietly, her hands trembling slightly as she listened. When I finished, there was a long silence. Then slowly she nodded. "I knew it," she said softly, her voice breaking. "I've felt it for a long time. Thank you for telling me, Rachel. I'm sorry you had to carry this alone." The days that followed were difficult. Aunt Linda confronted Uncle David, and the fallout was explosive. He denied it at first, then admitted everything when she showed him the details she'd gathered herself. Their separation became permanent, and eventually they divorced. My family was shaken. Some were angry at me for speaking up, saying I should have kept quiet to preserve peace. Others, like my grandmother, cried but eventually thanked me for being honest. Uncle David didn't talk to me for months. When he finally did, his words were bitter. "You ruined my marriage, Rachel." But deep down, I knew I hadn't ruined anything. He had done that himself. It's been years since then, and though the wounds are still there, Aunt Linda has rebuilt her life. She's stronger now, surrounded by friends who love her, and she smiles in a way I hadn't seen in years. As for Uncle David, he still drifts in and out of family gatherings, but things are never the same between us. The man I once admired is gone, replaced by someone whose choices left scars on everyone around him.